This morning I am in the so-called heartland of the United States, specifically in Des Moines, Iowa, visiting with our colleague John D. Edwards, who is Associate Dean for Information Resources and Technology and Director of the Law Library and Professor of Law at Drake University. John, it is our custom to begin these interviews learning a little bit about the person with whom I'm talking as a person outside of work, outside of the professional lives. Could you tell us a little bit about your life, perhaps not only today, but even when you were younger?
Well, I wasn't born in a log cabin, but I grew up in southeast Missouri in Kennett, which is probably best known as being the hometown for Sheryl Crow, the singer. In fact, she and my sister were close friends, so we had Sheryl Crow over at our house any number of times, and the family over, and so it was a great town to grow up in. A couple of key things probably from my youth in Kennett that probably impacted my ultimate career choice. One was the church in which I grew up, where service was an expectation. And secondly was scouting, where also service to others was one of the cornerstones. And so those two things, I think, really influenced the ultimate profession I chose, where service, working as a librarian, was one of the key things that you wanted to do. Beyond that, when I was in college, I became involved in student government and was student body president. And that involvement in student government led me in the path toward law school. And then it was in law school that I ultimately thought about becoming a law librarian. So that's, in a quick few paragraphs, is my life story.
Great. Well, to sort of supplement that just a tad bit, do you have any particular hobbies or other special passions that occupy time, in case the dean watches, always outside of work?
Well, I live in Clive, which is a suburb of Des Moines. And when we moved here, Clive did not have a public library. And the members of the city council did not think that was really necessary. The way library services were provided was the city paid a fee to neighboring communities so that Clive citizens could use the public library. There were a number of us that thought it was really important, certainly in the community I grew up as a child, very important to have a library within your community. So I decided to run for a seat on the city council. I ultimately was elected to the city council, became a strong proponent of a public library. We were able to pass a bond referendum to fund the public library. So within a few years after I joined the city council, we opened a fully accredited law library within a couple of years after having none whatsoever. So
You mean a fully accredited library?
Well,
public library.
Public library,
Yeah.
fully accredited public library. And so that was quite an accomplishment, I think, to be able to do that. The typical pattern in smaller communities was to start, a library in the city hall basement and grow from that. So we passed a bond referendum that made it possible to have a fully accredited public library from the very beginning.
Complete with its own physical facility?
Physical facility, staff, it was just, we all felt very proud of our accomplishment in being able to do that. Of course, accomplishing that, then I've set additional goals. I've been on the council for 22 years. So,
Wow.
So far, the voters haven't thrown me out yet.
They all like the incumbents. I mean, you see that in a lot of elections. Everyone's mad at Congress currently, from what I understand and know, but they like their member. So,
Yeah. Well, the key thing with city councils is it's a nonpartisan position, so we try to keep politics out of it to the best that we can. So that's very helpful.
You all have to live together too, sort of close together.
We all have to live together.
Yeah.
But that involvement does not leave a lot of free time, especially with the church and civic commitments and so forth. One thing I did do 5 years ago is I learned that there was a shortage of ministers in our area. There are a lot of small churches that cannot find ministers.
Oh.
They need someone to fill the pulpit. So I went through the process to be on the pulpit supply list. And so 2 or 3 times a month, I'll preach on a Sunday at a small church that lacks a minister or needs someone. In fact, I just preached this last Sunday. So that is, I get a great deal of satisfaction of helping those people in doing that. So it's
I would
a little bit
imagine-
unusual for a library
I would
director, I
imagine
suspect.
that is unusual. I haven't heard this one from a colleague. I suppose we all sort of preach in the classroom and so on, but not in quite the same way or on the same topics.
Not in quite the same way.
Yeah. But that sounds like you lead an interesting life sort of on the side. I stayed in your town last night. I pick a hotel that's of the type I like, and it happened to be in Clive. And
Oh,
it
okay.
looked like what little I saw from the interstate. It was a pretty nice little community.
Well, we appreciate the support, especially the hotel motel taxes, which
Well, yes, I mean, we reciprocate. My town and state do the same thing to all the visitors. I think that's how they do. You guys on the council can raise a little revenue and not get blamed by your own constituents and
Absolutely.
voters.
absolutely.
And then they go traveling and the same thing happens elsewhere, so it evens out probably.
Yeah.
Well, should we focus on your career now? I noticed your first job in preparing for today, that your first job out of library school was a librarian one, I think was the rank, and director of legal research and writing at the University of Missouri at Columbia School of Law. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how long you were there and sort of what you accomplished?
Sure. When I was in law school at UMKC, there was an opening for a student work in the library, and I was fortunate to get that job. And so that really sparked my interest in law librarianship. I really enjoyed the work, helping patrons find what they needed. Charlie Dyer, who went on to become editor of the Law Library Journal, was the director at the time, and so he was very, very helpful to me in that process. Dale Maggerell was my direct supervisor, and she was just an amazing resource in helping me learn the tools of the trade to be a good librarian. Charlie was always there to lend an ear, so that was very, very helpful. And he and the other librarians, Joseph U. Young was one, they would invite us over for dinner, and so we'd have, we not only enjoyed going to dinner and talking to the librarians, but as a poor law student, it was great to have a free meal there once in a while. So we really enjoyed that, and just great people, wonderful experience. They helped me learn so many of the basics of being a good law librarian, and I couldn't have asked for a better background there at UMKC to get started.
So I would imagine, which I do ask, if you had a mentor in your early years, would Charlie and perhaps some of the others be?
Charlie,
that kind of
Dale, I think they were very key folks in directing my path to law librarianship. They had vast experience and were able to point me in the right direction as far as anytime I had a question, and just I've just been blessed throughout my career to work with people like that who are so willing to share their time, their talents, their expertise, and helping just a law student learn things.
Probably getting a little ahead of ourselves, because I'm just going to mention your next job was at the University of Oklahoma, and Lala Gassaway was your director there. Would Lolly, I suppose, must have served as a mentor of sorts too.
Oh, absolutely. You couldn't ask for a better director than Lolly.
Yeah.
She trained quite a number of librarians.
Yes.
Jenny Parrish was there when I was there, working her way up the ladder. And so Lolly gave me great opportunities to do so many different things. I was in charge of Lexis and Westlaw training, and so I developed a training program there that led to an article in Law Library Journal. She made sure that every task that a director would need to do at some point was something that I experienced while I was there. I taught, I supervised staff, I worked on projects, wrote probably 1 million reports on various things. And they were all interesting things that were really good building blocks for someone who was interested in a career in libraries. She just was a wonderful mentor. And you look at her success, I mean, the number of folks that went up through the ranks at OU who then ended up as a director elsewhere. I mean, she did a great job.
She is very proud of all of you, because when I talked with her, both on and off camera, for her addition to the oral history, she recited all your names and where you were and how pleased she was to have been perhaps instrumental in bringing about some of this.
Absolutely.
Let me sort of, before we talk a little more about Oklahoma and your experiences there, and my incompetence as a interviewer, I skipped a question, and that is to ask you about your 3 degrees and where you got each and so on.
Well, I started at Southeast Missouri State University in Cape Girardeau, got my bachelor's degree there. Then from there, I went to the University of Missouri, Kansas City for my law degree. And that, again, is where I got interested in law librarianship. And the University of Missouri, then Columbia, had a library science program. And so I started that actually when I was in Kansas City, moved to Columbia, completed that. And so those are my degree progression. That is the law degree first and then followed by the library science degree.
Now, you mentioned earlier that you have as a sort of a passion on the side or whatever, that you actually preach in a formal setting in churches, and yet you don't list a degree in the ministry or theology or anything.
I do not. I went through the process with the presbytery to get on the pulpit supply list as they call us a lay speaker. And so I'm on that list, and we'll get called several times a month for these particularly small churches where they don't have a pastor. And
That
a little bit of
must be very interesting. I'm preparing for the sermons, and because I'm sure they don't want you to just preach any old heresy.
No. I mean, in our denomination, several, you have a lectionary where you have scriptures that you follow each week. So if you went to the Methodist Church, the Presbyterian Church, you might hear the sermon on the same topic. And so we follow the lectionary. So that requires that you look at those scriptures and develop a sermon based on that.
Yeah. My own denomination does somewhat the same thing. They have certain topics for each day of the year, actually, primarily the Sundays, and the person who gives the sermon, or we call them homilies, are asked to focus on the topics of the readings of that day. And so it's guided somewhat probably in a similar fashion. I suspect the churches borrow ideas from each other.
Well, I suspect they do.
Yeah.
And,
well, why not? If it works one place, it might work another.
But the seed was planted probably in high school. I, in fact, looked at attending a church-affiliated college, and in fact, I preached several times as a youth in our church in Kennett. But that tuition was just too expensive, so I ended up going to Southeast Missouri, which at the time, tuition was $110 a semester. Room and board was $330 a semester. I could go to school for $1,000 a year, and I could work during the year, during summers, and graduate with no debt, which is just
Our
amazing.
current colleagues, our younger colleagues, would just absolutely be shocked to hear some of the figures. And that we, of course, salaries and everything else were
absolutely
considerably lower than they are today, too, in our day. But it worked out, as you say. Many of us got out of school without debt, just having some sort of a part-time job or something.
Yeah.
Or perhaps rich parents, I don't know
Well,
how it worked.
There were some of those too.
Yeah, or very poor parents, and you get full,
Oh, yeah.
full scholarship.
Sure.
Well, sort of returning to your profession in which you make money,
Yes.
the law librarianship, you moved from Missouri to the University of Oklahoma in about 1980, according to my notes, as the public services librarian.
Mhm.
And about a year later, you were promoted to associate law librarian, which today would generally be called associate director, I believe.
Mhm.
And you served a year after that at some point, sort of as the acting director just before Lolly Gassaway, your director, departed to become the director at the University of North Carolina, where she finished out her career.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about all of that happening? And did you chase Lolly out the door? Which I understand you didn't, because I know Lolly and I know both you, and I know that wouldn't have happened. But how did you become acting director before she left?
Well, she took a leave, took a sabbatical,
Uh-huh.
and so it was quite well timed for my experience in that I was responsible for the library. So
Mhm.
to be an acting director for a period of time and doing the budget and everything just placed me in a very strong position to be able to look at directorships soon thereafter. So as the timing turned out, the following year, I left OU. And Lolly left not long that after, but I don't think there was a correlation. I think she could have survived at OU without me, but it just...
Well, I suspect she might have had to work awfully hard, but she would have, yes. So a year later, about 1984, you came here to Drake. Okay, and this is where you have, at least up until now, maybe you'll switch at some point, but I suspect you're here for the duration, John.
We've sunk our roots here, so it'd be hard to leave.
Well, it's a beautiful campus out here. Of course, this is we're doing this at the end of September, and it's gorgeous weather. Some storms came through a few days ago, cleaned all the humidity and stuff. So I go out here and I think, well, this must be what this place is like all year round. And maybe I'm quite wrong, but
we won't mention January, February in the Midwest.
That's right. Well, can you tell us a little bit about your experiences here at Drake and some of what you've accomplished, and also perhaps your role as a faculty member, because you're also a professor of law?
Well, coming to Drake was just a wonderful opportunity for a new director.
Mm-hmm.
It may not have seemed that way to some. They'd had an ABA site visit, and there were numerous problems with the library that needed to be addressed, so there was a lot of work to be done.
Mm-hmm.
Within the first few months, I had to develop a strategic plan, a collection development policy, neither of which had been done, and take care of all the things on the list that the ABA said were deficient. So very, very busy when I got here. We reorganized and shifted the entire collection. Keep in mind this was 1984, at a time when books were still heavily relied on by patrons. So the organization of the collection was not very logical. It was very difficult to find things.
Oh.
The most heavily used items were on compact shelving,
Wow.
and the compact shelving was not exactly reliable. So
Was it the old electric kind?
it was.
Yes,
It
I have
was.
seen that places where the things break down and
Oh.
there you are stuck.
And
Literally.
so it broke down all the time, and so people were constantly borrowing the ratchet so they could manually crank it open to get to the materials that they need. And so what we did, we reorganized, put heavily used items on open stacks. Actually, we put up additional stacks to accommodate that, and then put less frequently used items on the compact shelving, and that pretty much solved the problem. But we did all that in the span of a few months, and made policy changes so that it was easier for patrons to access the library, use the collection, and all that in the span of probably our first year here.
Now, was the ABA coming back sooner than the sabbatical reinspection?
No.
Or you had 7 years, but you
Yeah,
had to do it, but you got to it real quick?
It was the normal. They send you letters say, you're not in compliance with this, and this. So over that first year, I was able to take care of those, and we got a clean bill of health from that
Okay.
point forward. So that was very rewarding.
So you got yourself off their naughty list
Yes,
sooner than
yes,
waiting for the
yes,
next
yes,
inspection.
Yes, absolutely. We were very pleased with that. And in the process, we reinvigorated the library committee and got them actively involved and got the faculty involved. The year after that, then I was given total responsibility for the legal research and writing program.
Mhm.
And so the structure that I set in place is still what we have today. So it worked out quite well. So I taught legal research. I also taught technology classes. The initial class was computers in law. That doesn't sound very sexy today, but back in
Well,
the day,
it was as the computers were emerging.
Oh, absolutely.
and
So it's
becoming more part of everyday practice of law, to say nothing of research. Those courses were, around. There were a lot of them.
yeah. So it was heavily enrolled. Had a lot of students go through those computers in the law classes. So I was teaching legal research, computers in the law, and of course trying to run the library. And one of the deficiencies the ABA had noted was our physical plans. So we then started planning for a new building. And so from 91 to 93, that was occupied a great deal of time. In 1993, we opened the facility we're in right now, Opperman Hall, named after Dwight Opperman, who was president and CEO of West Publishing Company, and a Drake graduate from 1951. And after finishing Opperman Hall, then thereafter, anytime there was any facility issue, any renovation, anything else, it fell on my plate because I was the one who knew how to
You
deal with those.
proved your ability. Deans and others like to take advantage of people who have proven track records for getting it done right.
Well, and as you say, that's the case for many of the directors of that era.
Oh, yes.
Once you're able to do something, they realize that. So I kept getting additional responsibilities. Bookstore supervision. We had a student-run bookstore, and so I was responsible for that. Information technology was added, and so then my title became Assistant Dean for Information Resources and Technology after I took over those additional things. And of course, I was also serving on various university committees, on law school committees. And really the only way I was able to do that was in having such a wonderful staff. It's so important to hire the right people, and I've been blessed to have extremely talented people working with me who can do their job, and Drake's just been a great place in that regard.
Well, if the director knows his or her business, and I think I understand you fully do, you want to get the best people you can to work with you, because it just either makes or breaks the program you're running.
Oh, it does, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, you have had roles within the university, within the law school, but you've also been involved in the greater profession. I noted in preparing that you've been president at one point of the Mid-America Association of Law Libraries. You've been chair of ALL's Awards Committee, and of ALL's Committee for the Law Library Journal, and ALL Spectrum, which is a single committee. And you were president of the Mid-America Law Library Consortium as well. And you've already mentioned your membership on the city council for quite some time in the city of Clive, which is adjacent to Des Moines, where we are today. Despite all of this sort of thing, you've also been chair of the Board of Trustees of the Des Moines Metropolitan Transit Authority. You didn't mention that before. That must be an interesting sort of thing. And
Very much so.
yeah, some of your civic work and some of your professional work sounds like you have your fingers in all sorts of different, very diverse kinds of
Very much so.
activities. And I noticed also that You were even found time to be a team captain of West's Law Library decathlon and a gold medal winner in that operation as well. Could you tell us a little bit about some of all this activity?
Oh, sure. I was encouraged on by Lolly and others to get involved and give back. And so that's why I chose service in AALL, in MALL, and the consortium. You meet so many great people, and the process of working through those committees, it helps develop skills that are invaluable to you, whether you're going to be a director or fill some other role in a library. So, whether you're planning a regional conference, which I've done, whether you're serving on a committee, you learn how to deal with different types of folks that you'll encounter in a work environment. And you find out what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, and learn how to work together as a team to take advantage of the strengths that they have. So everybody works as a team to meet the goals. Again, whether it's just a committee or a regional planning group, whatever it happens to be. And as I say, that's especially true of the people I work with day to day right here at Drake. Just wonderful people. Now, you mentioned the West Law Library Decathlon, which is probably a really good example of what it's like to work with wonderful peers that you find in law librarianship. I was MALL president at the time, and we won that decathlon and earned $2,500 for our chapter, which was
Well, that's a sizable
That-
amount of change for one of the chapters.
that was very helpful.
Yeah.
And it was due to the great work of all the members in the chapter pulling together as a team. And my experience with that is typical of every group that I've been involved. Everyone pulling together to meet our common goals. So I think it's that common denominator of groups of librarians working together that makes the job so rewarding. It's enjoyable, it's fun, great people to work with.
You make very good friends in the profession generally, and it's one of the huge advantages I see in what I'm getting to do today, which is travel around the country doing these conversations for the putting together this oral history. I mean, I just absolutely have gotten into this, and as viewers on it, very many of these will have picked up from time to time, and others, and I do appreciate your willingness to be part of it. Well, John, before we get to that part of the thing, I don't know how you find the time, but you're also a scholar. You've written. You can tell us a little bit about some of that.
Well, one of the things that my early mentor, Lolly Gasaway, encouraged me to do was engage in scholarship. When I was in Oklahoma, I had the opportunity to complete several publications. And again, Lolly provided me with opportunities to do that. And if you look at my track record, my great interest is providing practical information that people can apply and find very helpful. So if you look at the article they did on constructing and building law school buildings, I had top 10 guidelines there, which I thought would be very helpful based on my experience in building to know what to do and what not to do. So. Or if you look at the articles I've written on Lexis and Westlaw training, kind of a how-to on that. And then more recently, with my books on Iowa legal research and problem workbook, helping students understand how to do research and developing problem sets with my co-authors that would help develop those skills. With the Iowa Legal Research Guide, no one had done that before. And so I was able to pull together experts, lawyers throughout the state of Iowa in their subject areas and put together the first book of its kind in Iowa. Again, a practical resource for anyone in Iowa trying to do research. So, I enjoy writing, and I enjoy the research aspect of it, and I think all of my scholarship has made me a better teacher and a better librarian. So I think it's essential to be able to do that scholarship. It benefits others and benefits me personally from the whole process involved in doing it.
Well, John, you are still active. I retired some years ago before we got into what Frank Hodak has described as these trying times, or however he phrases it, with cutbacks and curtailments and tremendous changes in the kinds of things we use to put together our collections today. You want to talk a little bit about what you see is going on in our field today and where you think we may be going? I realize in predicting the future, one is not going to be held to an absolute degree of certainty, but would you like to take a crack
Well, if I
at
could,
that?
I'd buy some lottery tickets, I suppose, if I could see the future. But I think it's a really exciting time to be a librarian. The changes that we've seen in just the last few years are greater than we've seen in the past decades. We've seen all these changes in technology. We're seeing students, digital natives, coming in the door with a different skill set than students of earlier eras. And so the role of the librarian today, I think, is even more important than it has ever been at any time in the past in helping these new patrons understand what resources are available in a law library. And many of our students and faculty, to that extent arriving today, don't really have a background in using a library or understanding the services that librarians can provide to them. So it's more incumbent on us today to be able to reach out and help those students, faculty, staff understand those resources and give them the best resources that are available. And so we're looking at librarianship being different than it used to be. Even a decade ago, it was basically build it and they will come. Well, that's not the case today. I mean, students and faculty aren't just coming into the library. So we have to reach out. We have to be more entrepreneurial. We have to get our message out and communicate more with our patron base as far as why they should come to the library or take advantage of the services that we have. I mean, librarian roles are changing. I mean, we're seeing more with the digital repositories, services to faculty. The scope of what librarians do is just going to continue to expand. It's just a really exciting time to be in libraries. I mean, I can't imagine a time with more change, more excitement, more opportunities for people to get into the profession. So it's just a great time to be doing what we're doing.
Yeah. It's sort of ironic, your view of, which I think is quite accurate, of what's going on in our profession generally in terms of shift to all sorts of new types of technology and the huge expansion of the opportunities that provides for everybody. In his conversation for this same oral history, Bill Lindbergh, who used to be an executive at West Publishing, talked about the role that Dwight Opperman, who was the president or CEO of West at the time, played in the decisions to develop Westlaw. He had to buck a lot of his senior executives' opinions that they were a publishing book company and ought to stick with what they knew how to do. And he said, oh, no, the world is changing. I'm using my own phrasing, but Bill described some of that. Dwight's heavy role in bringing about the transformation, first at the company and then later for all of us in the profession. He had quite a role.
Oh, absolutely. And, I've heard Dwight tell that story. In fact, I just told it to our students this past week as we're just doing Lexis and Westlaw training, and so gave a little bit of background on Dwight. I mean, Dwight graduated in 1951 and had some law school debt, like a lot of people did, and,
Sure.
and thought he'd go to West Publishing Company, work just for a little while and pay off some of that debt, and lo and behold, he stays there, becomes president and CEO, and then
Yeah.
when Thompson comes in, Thompson pays, I think it was $3.5 billion when they bought out West. So
Yeah, they paid top dollar for
They
it. I
did.
remember that.
They did.
We were all nervous that, one, there was somebody new coming on board, a very important company to us, and then what would they really do with it? You
Yeah.
know, it turned out it's still there. Prices are probably up a bit, but
Yeah.
I'm retired, so I don't care. Well, John, we're sort of nearing the end of our conversation today, but before we do, it's customary to ask if there's anything that we've not talked about that you would like to bring up.
Well, just a couple things. I want to go back and talk a little bit about my background in work at Missouri, because I certainly want to give credit to Susan Chalky, who was the director there at the time. She did just a fantastic job.
Mm-hmm.
I earned my master's at Missouri and started as an adjunct legal writing instructor there while I worked on my degree, and then was able to work in the library under Susan Chalky.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just a great environment. Susan had put together a wonderful staff there. So after I served as an adjunct in the fall semester, I prepared a report for the dean indicating what I thought would improve and strengthen their legal research and writing program.
Mm-hmm.
The dean took that report, read it very carefully, and then, unexpectedly, he offered me the job as the director of the program for the next year.
Oh.
And so for the next year, I was director of the legal research and writing program at the University of Missouri, and then continued to work for Susan Chalky in the
So
library.
you had 2 day jobs.
So two jobs. So I was able to teach, I was able to work in the library, do reference, and those were great opportunities. Also taught legal assistance at Columbia College as well. So I was getting a lot of teaching experience and then the library experience. So that was just a wonderful experience at Mizzou. And we really enjoyed our time there. The other thing I wanted to touch on was the significance of being a member of the teaching faculty here. And as a member of the faculty, I've always felt like I've been treated as an equal on all levels. I went through the same tenure process as everyone else did, and having faculty status, being on tenure track, I think it's been important not only for me, but for the library as well. I mean, I hear stories about library directors who maybe are on contract or aren't involved in teaching who maybe aren't treated as equals, and certainly that has not been my experience here. Our faculty members here are just committed to excellent teaching, and being actively engaged in the teaching process helps me, I think, be a better director. I realize what resources are needed. I realize what our students are using, what our faculty are doing. And I feel like I'm integrated in the life of the faculty. I learned so much in the hallway discussions with my colleagues, which, again, I make a point of doing that. And, so I'm not viewed as just someone who runs the library. I'm viewed as a teaching colleague. So I think it's important the librarians teach, and I think there's going to be more of a need and an opportunity in these changing times to do more of that. So those are just a couple of things that I wanted to highlight. But I also wanted to thank Hein for doing this series. It's such a wonderful opportunity to talk about some of our past experiences and share with the next generation some of the things that we've done in our past.
Well, thank you for being part of today. It's really been a real pleasure to be able to come here to Drake and this part of the country, especially this time of the year when it's so nice out there, and talk with you, John D. Edwards. And I want to thank you for taking your time and efforts to participate and be part of our history of law librarianship, about ourselves and our profession. And in thanking you, I'm doing it not just on my own behalf, but also on behalf of Michelle Wu, Frank Kodak, and Dick Spinelli, with whom I have the pleasure of working to put this project together. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Be sure to extend my thanks to them as well.
I will.